Thank you, Lascan Corlin, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this particular piece of legislation, and can I welcome the presence of the Oireachtas here to deal with this. Minister, I welcome the publication of this legislation, and I welcome the enactment of the legislation, particularly in terms of the additional powers that are being given to Comreg, which are very much warranted. But there are a few issues, Minister, that are not in this legislation that I believe need to be addressed. And the first one is, Minister, an issue that I've taken up on numerous occasions here in the House, and that is the European Commission definition of high-speed broadband. And as you know, one of the provisions here is in relation to universal service obligations and implementing the EU directive, and I'll come back to that in 1 second. But specifically, the difficulty at the moment is at EU level, the legal definition at EU level of high-speed broadband is 30 megabits per second. Now, no one in this country believes that 30 megabits per second is high-speed broadband. The European Commission itself is setting a target of gigabit broadband speeds in 8 years' time, and yet they are still having the legal definition of high-speed broadband at 30 megabits per second. Why is this a problem? The reason that this is a problem is that under EU state aid rules, National Broadband Ireland cannot intervene in any home and provide them with a fibre optic cable where they are getting a minimum of 30 megabits per second. And sadly, it's not even that they're actually getting a minimum of 30 megabits per second, but that the provider, usually Eir, is telling them that they're getting 30 megabits per second. And I have instances right across rural Ireland, on the edges of many of the towns and villages in this country, where people are not getting that 30 megabits per second. However, Eir are telling the department that they can provide them with that speed, and because of that, even though the fibre optic cable is outside on the pole outside their door, National Broadband Ireland are precluded from providing them with a service. So we do need the European Commission, while on one hand they're threatening us with legal action here, I would ask you, Minister, at Council of Ministers level, and with your engagement with the Commission, that they need to start pulling up their socks here. They need to revise the definition of high-speed broadband. There is no one on this earth believes that 30 megabits per second of a download speed and 5 megabits per second of an upload speed is high-speed broadband. Why are the Commission not prepared to change that definition if they're setting a target for 2030 of 1 gigabit? Because Ireland is probably the only country in the European Union that will be able to universally achieve that across the country, but we're being precluded from doing so because the Commission will not revise their definitions in relation to that, and I hope that you can make progress on that. And while I'm on that issue, Minister, something that I took up as Minister for Communications with the Commission is that there should be a legal universal service obligation in relation to the provision of high-speed broadband to homes. There's no point the Commission talking about, high-speed internet access, about giving gigabit speeds to homes, if there's not a legal obligation put on homes. Because the difficulty is, and we will be unique in European terms in having fibre to pretty much every door by 2030. The difficulty is we're going to have a handful of homes scattered in different parts across the country where financially it's going to cost an astronomical sum of money for the state to actually put in a broadband connection to them, where if we had a universal service obligation on the telephone providers to provide broadband to every home, then this would overcome it. So we have a legal definition there at present where people are legally entitled to have a copper wire brought to their door so that they can get telephone services, but they have no legal entitlement to any broadband service whatsoever. And again, this comes down to the Commission. The Commission need to move on this. They've been pussyfooting around these issues for long enough. So if they're prepared to take out the big stick and wave it at Ireland, we should be going back to them and asking them. We're the ones that are showing Europe how this can be done, how this will be done, and let them give us the opportunity to deliver on that by changing the archaic rules that they presently have in place. If I could come back closer to home, Minister. And one of the provisions in this legislation is the whole area of cybersecurity, particularly in relation to 5G networks. And I don't intend to get involved in that debate here today. That's a debate for another day. But I want to raise a related issue. And that is, we all accept that the 5G networks will need to be ubiquitous across this country if we're going to have a quality of treatment for people on our island. And, you know, at the moment, we're looking at it in terms of the 5G services that are there at the moment. The reality is, in terms of the provision of services to farmers in rural areas, in terms of crop management, in terms of livestock management, in terms of the provision of healthcare services, 5G networks are going to be vitally important in relation to that. But we have no obligation in providing 5G coverage on a geographic basis in this country. Now, the disappointing thing about this is the government launched its National Digital Strategy earlier this year on the 1st of February. And it has set itself a bizarre target of covering the goal of only covering the populated areas of the country with 5G by 2030. Now, we're going to provide fibre to every rural home, 146,000 kilometres of it, to 96% of the landmass of this country 2 years earlier. And we're only setting ourselves a target of 5G coverage for the populated areas by 2030. Already, Air are covering 70% of the population, covering 322 towns across the country. And 3 have a population coverage of 79% 5G coverage at present. So we're only setting ourselves a very low benchmark by 2030. Now, I accept, once you move into rural areas, the costs of this become prohibitive. So what I'm asking, Minister, is to sit down with the industry and agree the establishment of a single rural 5G network across this country, so that all of the operators can piggyback on it and provide 5G coverage to every single townland and parish across this country. Now, this makes financial sense for the government to do it if there's a little bit of joined-up thinking. And the reason for that is, Minister, the existing Tetra radio system that is used by An Garda Síochána and is used by the emergency services is costing us €40 million a year. This technology now is obsolete. We're going to put in a new network. We're going to spend a lot of taxpayers' money in rolling out a separate, independent, geographically covered 5G network across this country to provide the services to our emergency services. Why not have a 5G service that people in rural communities can use, that people in any location on this island can dial 112 or 999 and get access to the emergency services and get access to the type of medical support that can now be made available on a 5G network, as well as providing it to the emergency services, as well as providing it to An Garda Síochána. And instead of this costing €40 million a year, we could replicate what is being done in Northern Ireland, where they are actually rolling out a rural network there. And the estimated cost from industry of rolling that out here in this jurisdiction would be between €30 and €50 million in a one-off capital cost not a recurring cost, benefiting our communities as well as benefiting the taxpayer. Thank you.